Hey, it's V again, and I've just finished When Gravity Fails by George Alec Effinger. So, this is a science fiction novel set in a futuristic, semi apocalyptic world. Like, I say that because it's a world where a lot of the larger countries have fallen apart and become a bunch of little kingdoms, republics, etc. So, everything feels pretty chaotic. Um, the technology in this world makes it so that people can essentially build themselves from the ground up. Like you can become almost anything you want to. Like gender swapping is extremely common. People can just walk into a clinic and the doctor shows them a catalog and you basically like order, oh, I want like these eyes and that like waist and those legs and these arms, like, and they piece you together however you want. And in addition to being able to, I guess, get pretty much whatever kind of body you desire, people can change their brains in two major ways. So first, you can use these, I assume, chips or something that can give you additional information. So for instance, if you don't speak Japanese, but you want to talk with someone who only speaks Japanese, you can put in a chip and you will suddenly become fluent in Japanese for as long as you have the chip in your head. So that's a little bit more normal. In addition to this kind of modification, you can actually alter your entire personality. Like they have the ability to download, I guess, in like people's entire brains. Like they can make copies of people and you can load them into your head, and for however long you have them in your head, like they become like you become them, and your original self takes a back seat to like the modified personality until someone removes like whatever it is. I think that sounds pretty scary, but yeah, not something I would want to do. So the main character, Marit, lives in an Arab ghetto in a really big city, and he refers to himself as a private strong arm. I'm not entirely sure what kind of work he normally does. It sounds like he probably does a lot of fighting and that kind of thing, but this particular story begins when a client tries to hire him to help search for someone who went missing a couple years ago. Unfortunately, said client is almost immediately shot and killed right in front of him. And this is just one of a series of murders, some of which like are extremely brutal, that happen in the area where he lives. So eventually, Marit gets recruited by the godfather of the city, like I guess the equivalent of their mafia boss or something. And he gets pressured into becoming that person's like instrument of revenge, because a lot of the people who got killed are people who work for him. And after like sorting through all the possibilities and looking at his reputation, said boss thinks that Marie is like the perfect choice, I guess, for going after this killer who appears to be using a bunch of different personality modifiers that imitate I guess like really skilled killers, or like, you know, people with really scary abilities or like histories related to killing or committing murder. And in order to perform this job, Marit also gets pressured into getting those brain modifications I mentioned, because he was actually originally one of the few people who really held out against these things, because he's always afraid of or he's been afraid all his life, I guess, of the idea of maybe becoming someone else. Like he's not sure once you make those modifications how he would ever know whether like the person who comes out the other side is still himself, and this is something that really frightens him. So something I liked about this story, like, well, one, the world was pretty interesting. Two, like, I think I liked, they had a kind of sardonic humor in the writing style throughout the story. Like, For example, like this taxi driver the main character really likes to use is someone who takes a lot of hard drugs that affect his brain, and because of this, like he like hallucinates a lot, and he comments that, oh yeah, like, well, he's driving through the city and the taxi driver does a pretty good job considering he has to avoid all these obstacles in the street that only he can see, and like a lot of these things he tries to avoid are various like demons, and so he's like, oh, and they manage to reach their destination without hitting any demons along the way. Like this is just kind of dry humor that's mixed in with the way things are written that I really appreciated. But something I did not like, I guess this might be a bit of a spoiler alert, but I think I didn't like how it felt like the main character ended the story in a worse place than he began. Like I mentioned that he was pressured into like taking on this job and pressured into getting the modifications. Like even though he does part of him does want to help deal with like the killer because he is worried about the people that he cares about. He it feels a bit like he goes through all this trouble because people around him don't give him any choice, and they blame him for like not having the courage to get modifications without really understanding like his point of view. And then at the same time, by the end of the story, like they maybe appreciate the sacrifices he's made for like 5 minutes, and then they all turn on him for other reasons because he's like the easiest scapegoat on which to blame like other problems that come up. So it feels a bit like he ends the story with like both fewer friends than he had at the beginning and like a worse position than he had at the beginning, just because like you had to do all these things and you're now still stuck with another job that you don't really actually want to take. And I don't know if maybe it's a type of commentary on society or not, but in that regard it was a bit unsatisfying.